Welcome ladies and gentlemen to another episode of Picks to Watch. This time we're moving into the most competitive part of the season, the playoffs. We're going to be looking at some of the interesting picks that could make their way there, so let's jump right into it. The playoff patch is keeping the meta rather stable heading into one of the most competitive times of the year. With that in mind, I wanted to highlight some of the lesser known picks that could have a huge impact as playoffs unfold. One of the biggest changes in the patch was that to Blade of the Ruined King. A bunch of champions benefited from the changes, but none more than 80 carries, which brings us to two marksmen that we haven't seen in quite a while, Kalista and Kog'Maw. These two have struggled to find any footing since Jhin and Varus started their ruthless rule with their lethal playstyle. But with both carries receiving nerfs and changes to Blade of the Ruined King, Kalista and Kog'Maw have a chance to find their way back into the meta. Kalista is a kiting and self-peel specialist. When given a Blade of the Ruined King, that makes her mobility and outplay potential all the more terrifying. Additionally, with changes to Ren not too long ago, Kalista's laning has become more potent when it comes to sustaining and trading. Now, while her Ren is also great for monsters such as Dragon and Baron, her ability to take towers isn't the strongest given her low range and the limited amount of AD that she gets from her itemization. This, however, is not something that the Void Puppy suffers from. With Kog'Maw's ultra long range and natural attack speed gains, sieging enemy structures becomes a thing of ease. He also benefits from Blade of the Ruined King's early bump in damage, which provides a smoother transition into the late game Kog'Maw, where he will melt you faster than an active volcano ever could. On top of Blade of the Ruined King, both Kalista and Kog'Maw synergize well with the mystical Lulu. She has seen an increased play across all regions thanks to the amazing utility and laning power she provides, which effectively turns your AD carry into a tank, which is pretty sweet. Another champion that benefited from the Blade changes is the Rift's most slippery trickster, Fizz. Way back in Season 5, top laners like Marin used him to tear apart enemy tanks.
Soul has his ultimate up, but Marin going to get knocked up by Jarvan. They're going head-to-head at the moment. There's the Ignite, he kills Catch, and then he just playful tricksters out the 1v2 win.
And now he's back topside for a second round of tank shredding action. Fizz works best when fights and skirmishes are drawn out. This makes tanks an ideal opponent for Fizz because it is difficult for them to punish him in drawn out fights, and a long lane makes it harder for them to escape. With no punishment for Fizz in the early game, he is free to farm up towards Trinity Force and Blade of the Ruined King, the perfect item for a 4-foot fishman with a pole. These allow him to become a potent split pusher with fantastic dueling potential. It also helps that he has an immense amount of mobility thanks to his playful trickster and urchin strike, making him difficult to lock down. It is important to remember that small skirmishes and finding one-on-one duels are where Fizz thrives. If you can force him into a teamfight, it becomes easier to trap the fish and return him to his barrel, where I've heard it's pretty easy to shoot fish. Speaking of blades, our last pick to watch is the most sinister of them all, Talon. The high-flying assassin has seen increasing amounts of action over in the LCK and is slowly but surely making his way to the west. Talon's calling card is his ability to parkour over terrain in an instant, giving him an incredible tool to roam to other lanes and get the blood flowing much quicker than his opponents would like. This mobility makes his team fighting surprisingly strong, as it allows him to take creative paths to dive onto the back line, then swiftly dive out to buy time for his cooldowns to return, before he looks to repeat the process of systematically ripping your team apart. As you can imagine, his mobility, combined with his dueling prowess, along with the added safety of his ultimate, makes him a fantastic split pushing option. Even with this in mind, if Talon isn't close to terrain, it becomes harder for him to find effective flank paths and key onto those primary targets. It's also worth noting how his itemization is often built towards that of a glass cannon, which means that with enough crowd control and peel, you may start to wonder whose bright idea it was to buy a cannon made of glass. That concludes it for this episode of Picks to Watch. Be sure to hit me up with what you think could make its way to playoffs, and if you want more information, be sure to head over to lolesports.com. With that, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.